You guys, I tell you what, there's a perfect reason and a perfect moment and a gift in everything. So thank you all for waiting as we had our technical glitches getting started this evening. As we start with our intention for the show, I have to tell you, this has been an interesting, thought-provoking self-dialogue that I've been having with myself over the last week. And I think the reason is because there's so much that we take for granted, yet there's so much that we don't take for granted, and there's so much that we overlook or choose not to see that is typically equally as important as what's taken for granted, that when we sit and actually think about our success and our joy and our fear and our loss, that any of those things is incredibly scary. And so we look a little closer and we have these taboos that we might have learned from our family or watching from those that we trust and have led us through life on the path that we are, the role models that we've had. So how do we be different? How do we learn and how do we sit back, take a look and actually bring more of ourselves to each of the experiences we have? And when it comes to grief, what does that actually mean? And those are just some of the things that we hope to dive into tonight. And I think this show is going to be incredibly fast and incredibly packed with great information. So before we get started, I have a cup of tea right behind the screen, and I'm going to snag my cup of tea. So if you have your drink, get it handy, and take a minute and just sit and really sink into the chair, or sink into your feet if you're standing, or sink into the floor or your bed or your couch if you're leaning back and laying with your feet up. And really feel that ground. Feel your heart beating and feel the presence and the space that you are joining with Scott and myself and Misty as we have our conversation tonight. And we can't wait to see what you have to say in the comment stream and what you share after the show. All right, Scott, how are you doing tonight?
Well, I think we're doing just fine. And while I was working with some technical things, you and Misty were able to actually talk back and forth, and I was able to kind of glean a little bit of what you were saying, and I was very excited to just hear and sense how well the two of you were bonding and getting together. So I just have this feeling that this is going to be one of those special programs, and really looking forward to how the conversation will lead us through just some wonderful nooks and crannies, through the eddies and so forth, and kind of go from there.
All right. Well, that's awesome. So I've been sinking into my chair, and yes, we were having a fabulous green room conversation. I will tell you what. And this is proving to already be amazingly fruitful, because the perspective that we bring to our life and how we're able to bring in new data, I guess, if you will, or new experiences really flourishes through that. So with that, I wanted to take a moment and say hello and welcome, Misty. Thank you for joining us tonight on the JSY show.
Thank you. It's a sincere pleasure to be here, and it feels good. It feels great. Thanks.
Good. And your website, bittersweetblessings.com, you coach people through grief, and this is something that is to me, it's very unusual, and I think it's very necessary. How did you find yourself on this path?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. For quite a while, I'd been asking myself, like, as a coach, how do I serve? I live in the Arctic. I look outside at the Arctic Ocean, and I have a bit of a bird's eye view, and I see the world, I think, from a bit of a different lens. So I've been asking for a long time, how to better, what do people need, what's not being done? And then this spring, my mother passed, and that was the first time someone very close to me has passed. And then it hit me how, well, I mean, not to be rude, but it feels like as a culture and as a society, we're really babies when it comes to death and dying. So I was having this huge feelings, like someone was massaging my heart, and I was just in awe of this, the depth of human emotion that I didn't know existed within. And people would come by and oh, I'm sorry for your loss. And there was probably less than 5 responses I'd get. And I thought, wow, the juxtaposition of the what I was feeling compared to the human communication I was receiving about this was just this huge gap. And that's when I thought, oh, maybe I need to address this. And I had a lot of resistance. There was a lot of resistance. Death, it's not a sexy topic. But as much as I explored and resisted this, there were signs, lots of different signs that I couldn't ignore. So that's how I started on this path.
So I'm going to go back for just a minute. When you were talking about resistance, was it your resistance to the idea, or was it other people's resistance to this idea that you naturally seem to have found yourself as a speaker and a champion of our human on the spectrum of human emotion?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you say that, because this is I'm talking early on when it was just me thinking of this. So I'm just processing it, and I'm a bit of a loner, I'm a bit of a hermit, and so when I have these big ideas, I often don't share them with people, because I know I didn't share this with people for a long time because I knew it would probably get shot down, because it's a little bit outside of the norm and a little bit taboo. So I kept it all within, and I just had my internal, questioning. And one of the interesting things that happened is I was driving in my mom's truck, driving my daughter, driving back from daycare, driving through this desert bluff, and I turn on the radio, and I very rarely listen to the radio, and CBC was on, and it was a interview about the death cafes, and they were popping up all over Europe, and there's one in Victoria, Canada, and so there was little signs like that. Yeah. And I found an old university paper. I found a stack of them, actually, and I rifled through them. I chose about 5 to put at my bedside. And then I chose one out of those 5 just at random, and I read it. And this was written when I was something like 20, and it said, in order to fully feel life and experience life, we must first face and accept our death. So there was lots of signs.
I'm going to jump in here right now, because this is something that I think, we all give death thought from time to time, but doesn't it just seem like a perfect system that it's built into human life, that you just can't get close to someone, you can't build a relationship and then love them, and then go through life just being superficial and not worrying about things, because you just know that at some point someone is going to up and die, and they're going to leave you. And the system is just made so that you are forced to think deeply about issues of life and death and meaning and all of that. And it's almost as if it's built into the system on purpose. Is that similar to what you were just saying? And have you given some thought to that?
Yeah, and I think, Scott, when you say the system, I'm interpreting that as the system of being human, the system of the human being system. Is that correct?
The cosmic, something that is cosmic,
Yeah.
something that is beyond us.
100%, 100%. From my experience, and since I've started this journey, everyone that I speak to, when I bring this up, they connect, and I haven't had one person yet say no. And what it is that when we're hit with a huge loss and a death of a close loved one, it's almost as if the world as we know it, all the material stuff that occupies our mind and our life and our day-to-day, that all just falls down, and that's nothing anymore. And what's left is the internal that those deep feelings that we didn't know we had within ourselves. And that, I believe, is the gift, to really connect again with what is really true. Excuse my dog. He's normally very quiet. So this is what I feel is the sweet amongst the bitter, is that great loss allows us to dive deep and really connect with what's important, get back to the basics. Yeah.
Well, okay, so can I jump in really quick, please?
Please,
With
please.
the idea of I wanted to talk about back to the basics, and when we think about what we're doing in relationship to things like feeling, because if everything falls away and all we have is our feeling, do we have, in the sense of loss and grief, does that also occur when we feel ecstatic and when we experience bliss? Is there a comparison? Because if I think about the opposites, right? What's the opposite of fear? The opposite of fear is this extreme excitement. What's the opposite? The opposite of sad is happy, and it's this double-edged sword. So can you feel the same thing, so that we could so maybe some of us who have not experienced loss, or those of us who have felt loss, can actually see the other side, that it is two sides of a coin, and boy, do those emotions come from the same starting place.
There was a lot you said there, but the first thing I'd like to touch on is that fear, because the course I created was really about facing fears. When we experience loss, it's often very closely connected with fear. What am I going to do now? Who am I without my other half? So fear is huge. And from my perspective, we can, and this isn't me, someone else wrote this, and when I read this, it connected. We can be operating from two modus operandi, two modes. We can be in fear or we can be in faith. So when you say opposite of fear, and faith I see as could be love. So you could be in fear or in love. So you're either at peace and feeling happy and good about things, or you're a little bit afraid or anxious. So my work is to shift consciousness from fear to faith or to peace. And I sense that if we can look at death and accept it as part of the human journey and experience, then we've shifted that big dark piece of fear into the light, and that makes life so much more wonderful and worth living.
I think that's awesome, and I hear you when you're talking about love and faith. I'm hearing this groundedness, and that if we bring that groundedness with us into each experience, it's almost like the roots of a tree in a windstorm. That our roots are solid, and we can bend, and some things might break, but in the grand scheme of things, we're not going anywhere.
That's exactly it. And I often say, it doesn't matter what's happening around me. What's most important is what's happening within me. And if I can rely on self and trust on self and feel okay with self and love self and feel confident about self, then it doesn't matter what craziness happens in the world, because I know I'm okay.
Well, let me share something from my own experience and then see how you might respond to it. And that is that those who have been close in my life, every one of them faced death not only with courage but with peace of mind, and they were either ready for it, or if they weren't ready for it, it was something that they had a quiescence of mind about it. They modeled a certain type of relationship with death that, as I was observing, and I was at my father's bedside when for the last 10 or 12 hours of his life, and I was able to just really see this process, I guess the point that I'm making is that because there was no fear and there was a peace of mind and a peace of heart in those who are close to me, it has somehow transformed my relationship with death as well. So that every time I go through the experience of being the one who's left behind, uh, it is just something that I perceive as different than what I see other people having. And it was because of the gift of their courage. Could you speak to that, Misty? And I'm seeing Misty's
And it looks like
profile.
maybe, okay, I was going to say she's not back yet. I find that really
Yeah.
interesting because I know that there's um, I know that it's a very interesting idea, Scott, that could we look to the person who is leaving this realm of the physical body as a guide to what we should feel and how we could approach that.
So Misty, welcome back. Uh,
Thank you.
just to briefly sum up what what we know about death is modeled by other people, and if the people that we know or close to have courage as they pass, as they die, then that might do a lot to say, oh, okay, well maybe there's something in there for us to pay attention to. Your thoughts?
Yes. Well, since I started on this journey of exploring this, I've spoken with a lot of people who've had near-death experience. One woman who was proclaimed dead and came back. Also to hospice workers who work daily with people who are dying. And the messages that I'm getting is that it's a very peaceful thing. So often, not often, sometimes people approach it with fear, but when they get to the point where they're close to crossing over, or kind of in that in-between space, their physical body may be here, but their spirit is transferred over, there is always deep peace. So my thoughts are that the fear is just something that we as a culture and society have, for some reason, taken on and accepted as perhaps a bit of the norm. And that's what I wish to change, because I really feel there's nothing to fear. It's really death, their endings are really just a new beginning. Something Einstein told us, we don't, energy doesn't die. It simply changes form. So the energy that I feel is me and my life, and this energy I feel, this can't, I know this can't die, but the body will die. So when the body dies, it's unknown, and that people are afraid of the unknown. But if you come at it from a place of faith and trust, it's really just a new beginning.
So there are actually there's actually several parts to death and dying, and one part happens to be grief. And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to grief, and perhaps within the context of grief being a well, what is it if not a coping mechanism for us to be able to deal with death and maybe the fear of the unknown, and are there blessings that could be found within grief, and if so, what might they be?
Yeah. Well, from working with people who are suffering because of loss of a loved one and who are in deep grief, my experience is that the deep feelings themselves are quite wonderful, if I may say so. In wonderful in that they show the depth of love you had for someone is often reflected by the depth of grief and the depth of loss and the depth of feeling that you feel when they're gone. So that in itself is a beautiful thing. And if you're hurting deeply, it shows that you've loved deeply. Now, the other part of that is people often get stuck and potentially lead to depression when their thoughts start to judge their grief and their mourning, and they start to think, oh, I need to be moving on by now. I shouldn't be in my pajamas every day. It's been a month or however long. I should be doing XYZ. I should be doing this. I shouldn't be doing this. So when the monkey mind, as Deepak Chopra calls it, kicks in and starts putting these value judgments and these shoulds on your personal experience and feeling of loss, this is when it can become more troubling than I believe it actually is at core, which at core I feel is just a very deep feeling that needs to be honored and respected, and everyone has their own journey and path, and the trick, I think, is to honor that and to love self and to respect what you're feeling.
What I hear you saying is that, and I'm going to totally put this in a different context, right? I have a 3-year-old, and so I'm going, oh, okay, Carter does some things way more advanced and learns them much faster than other children. But on other things, he's either not interested, he learns slower, or he has just a different cycle. And just like we all have those journey, we hit those milestones at different points, and that just because we're not hitting the milestone when somebody else is doesn't mean that we should be judging ourselves. It means it's the path that we're supposed to take. It's whatever we're supposed to learn from the experience that. And here's another part of it. I think it goes, we were talking about resistance at one point, and when we're thinking about resistance, the more we resist something, the longer it's going to take to move through that and expect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I've experienced a lot of loss in my life, not only loss through death, but loss in general. And it's happened so often that I've now see it as always as opportunity for growth, because I believe in a higher knower, and that sometimes when I think I'm going in one direction, this is the right direction, and that door just slams closed, you feel devastated, you lost, don't know what to do, all this. But it's happened so many times to me now that I'm like, okay, so this is a sign from the greater knowers that there's something more for me, that on my path on earth as a human being walking the earth, there's things I need to learn and grow, and this, although it's perceived as devastating, there's a lesson here. So when I experience loss now, and there's little losses daily and weekly and monthly, and there's huge losses too, but when I experience those, I'm through practicing, I'm getting better at, okay, so that door's shut, I know there's going to be a window that's opens. This is the unseen's way of saying you need to shift where you're looking. You need to, shift the way you're thinking to move forward.
I love that. And thinking about, I'm going to go back to something you talked about, the self-talk, and you talked about self-judgment, and that could lead to depression. When we're in a situation where it's a family member that passes, or and we're all going through that, what are some of the signs that we could really assess in those around us? And maybe this is a friend. We have a friend who's lost somebody close to them. What are some of the signs that, when we're talking about grief, that we could be looking for, and being able to help hold a space for them to have the journey that they need to have?
Mm-hmm. Most often, well, I guess two things. A good friend of mine who also works in this field, Patty Burgess, she's been in this field for much longer than I, and she recently had a family member who passed, and what she shared with me was that sometimes family isn't best to turn to, because if they're also grieving, they can't really be there for you because they have their own stuff. So sometimes it is better to turn to a friend. And as a friend, the best thing we can do is to really let that person know, to honor their process, and to go inside and to never mind what the outside world is saying, and never mind what the cultural norms are, or never mind what people are telling them to do, but just to really feel all that they're feeling and allow it to flow. Because every time the big feelings come up, and there are incredibly big feelings, and our monkey mind says, oh, not supposed to do that, not supposed to feel it, stuff it down. Well, that slows down the healing process. When we feel very deeply, it's an incredible cathartic opportunity. So there may be stuff down there from years ago. It may be something, a teacher or a parent. There may be abuse. There may be all these horrible things that potentially can happen to a person. And when you are affected by deep loss, this is an amazing opportunity to allow those other hurts to surface and come out through the deep sobbing, through the deep really feeling and letting go. And we're not given that opportunity very often as humans to really go deep unless we are devastated. So through devastation, this is an opportunity to heal all past hurts, not only this one.
You know, and I'm going to say I love the fact we're talking about hurt. And let's really dive into the taboo of this. Do you have any concept of where it came from, or societally what occurred that we shifted away from not wanting to feel, I'm not, for lack of a better description, icky?
Yeah.
You know, that could be from the uncomfortableness of our elbow or the pain in our baby toe, all the way up to depression and loss and fear and anger. I mean, even anger falls into that icky these days.
No, it's quite common. Women aren't allowed to be angry, especially women. It's a very good question, and I would love to research that. I don't know if I'll have time in this lifetime. Someone maybe has, but I'll share a few stories. So, well, first of all, in other cultures, it's not always so. And an example is when I was traveling, I was in Ecuador. I found a place, a little town called Baños. I quite liked it. So I travel without an agenda. And if I find a place and like it, I stay for a few weeks or maybe a month. And so I was in this town, and every day I'd go for a walk into the market, and I'd pass this woman at her store, and I'd often stop and chat with her. Well, one morning I walked by, and she was sitting there, and she was sobbing openly on the street, and her helper was with her and consoling her, and I stopped and said hello, and she, she just told me what she was sad on, and then I could see she was fine. She was sobbing, but she was fine, and I continued on with my day. And that really, it was such an eye-opener for me. It was so beautiful to see someone openly expressing feelings. And I don't know why or when in our culture we stopped doing this, or we made this okay. I mean, I could speculate. We can all speculate. But there is this idea of putting on a show, putting on a front, pretending everything's good, and life's not like that. Life's not like that. I mean, for instance, if you could see my house right now, I came home, it was supposed to be renovated, and I came home to about a centimeter of drywall dust. So I'm still living in an unfinished home, but life's not.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. It's life, right? And it's not perfect, and we shouldn't pretend it is. And just like tonight, it's glitches. It's life. It's okay.
That's right. Yeah. And in our house, we really practice being able to own a feeling. Now, we don't walk up to each other and scream when we're mad just because we're mad. We are allowed to have those feelings, and if they come up, we just have them. And we could be in the same room, but we're in our own space in the same room. And that's actually a change that Ryan and I have been working on. And it's a change because we want to set a good example for Carter, because neither one of us felt like, not that it wasn't provided to us, but as adults we have that, whatever it is, it got closed. As we grew up, as we accepted the stories and we accepted the societal norm of we're not supposed to feel those feelings, so let's just not show it. And if by not showing it, we're not feeling it, which being able to move through a feeling and feeling it, like your experience
Mm.
in with the woman in Ecuador, I have to tell you, I think that is so cool because you were able to witness and move on, and that may be exactly what she needed. She needed you in that journey to have that human connection, just a compassionate, straight up human to human contact, and go, oh, yes, I am sad. Somebody else sees me this way. And that could have been the catalyst that she needed to move through the rest of her experience. And I think we need that for each other, and to allow each other a space and be able to
Yeah.
witness it and hold that without feeling like we have to do anything.
Yeah.
Because the
Yeah.
witnesser has to do that too. I think that's part of it is, oh, well, we don't want anybody else to feel bad, so we just step up. Well, then maybe we learn it a little bit that that's not the right thing, when in fact we're just trying to help. And we
Yeah.
inadvertently shut down that conversation, and we shut down that experience. And
Mm.
finding the courage to be open, I think, is a really difficult thing to do.
So I'm getting
Yeah.
a sense that we move through things, and if we don't show our emotions, we might get stuck there. So I guess the question I might have now, Misty, is how long does it take between we're talking about death and the coping of death with death and so forth? And I know that there, what is the arc or a normal arc that one might expect?
Mm.
Not necessarily the phases that one goes through, but
Yeah.
clearly something is different at 2 weeks after the death of a loved one, and then 2 years, and then 10 years, and then I can remember my dad when he was in his 50s or 60s talked about his mother, and it just brought up the emotions, and he was as involved and as present regarding her then as he was in his youth. So it's not that things go away, but what can we expect in terms of just a natural trajectory as we work our way through, assuming we allow our emotions and so forth to play themselves out? What can we expect
Yeah.
in the arc of the
Yeah.
aftermath of the death of a loved one?
Well, it's very interesting that you bring this up because, you'd think there'd be kind of a bell curve. This is the norm. And from my experience in working with people, the biggest concern they have is that, well, I'm supposed to be over this by now. So I 100% do not believe there is such a thing. We are Pierre Desjardins. I may have the name wrong, but we're humans having a spiritual experience, or we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And whatever our reason is for being here, whatever our growth path is for Earth, whatever it is that we're here to learn, each of us has our own unique journey. And it's about honoring your own unique journey, what is true for you. And I believe the difficulties arise when we look to the outside of ourselves for answers. I really feel that the answers lie within. Just as the acorn, the seed, becomes the great oak tree. We were once a seed, and we're on a path of becoming. And if we look outside of ourselves and try to follow something outside of ourselves, it may detract us from our becoming. I'm
So
not
how
sure
do
if
we
this
prepare?
makes sense, but
I'm sorry. How do we prepare for our own death?
mm, um, I think it's self-love and self-acceptance, and not running from it anymore. So facing fear, that was the original title of my course. Facing fear was near. So it's facing our fears. And when you face your fear, it has this amazing thing happens, that it begins to dissolve, because often what happens is when we have a fear, this is a psychological science thing, we revert to brainstem, because it's fight, it's flight, or freeze, and these worked in the past. But our DNA hasn't caught up to the modern times. So what happens is we're in traffic, or something happens, and we revert to brainstem. So when we think of something like death, we automatically fear because that's the cultural norm. So we shut it down. So we don't sit peacefully with it and explore it and let our minds entertain it. So to prepare for it is to simply to begin entertaining the idea, which is kind of what I'm about, is why we're having this conversation. Let's talk about it. Let's put it on the table. We don't need to pretend it's not there. It won't happen. Yeah.
And I have to tell you, this has been a conversation that I didn't know where it was going to go when we started. And I love the path that we have gone down. I'm going to go back to the title of our show here tonight, Strength Through Loss. Are there one or two things that you have learned that show up as strength or that are observed as strength that maybe we can start identifying as ourselves right now in this moment, so that when we are faced with a loss and we are going through a grieving process, we can recognize we already have the roots to stand strong and to know that the feeling is a feeling that we can move through and be on the journey for our journey.
Yeah. Well, when you are experiencing those deep, deep, deep feelings, don't run from them. Dive into them. And when you dive into them and start swimming in them, you will find that bliss. Because it's part of being human. It's part of the human experience. The depth of feeling is a gift. These deep feelings are, so don't run from them. Dive into them. And in any deep feeling, dive into it. And once you start swimming with the current of the feeling, it's really a breathtaking experience. So and don't believe me, but try it, because I've done it. I too grew up in a family where we didn't feel, and I had to learn this. And since I've been practicing this, it's really changed my life.
And these feelings are not in isolation. They are directly related to, when we're talking about the death of a loved one, they're directly related to your relationship with the person who has passed. Is it not? So it's not as if the relationship ends. It transforms, and with the depth of feelings that you have, does it not change you profoundly, and you have a choice of having it change you for the better or for the worse? And how do you define that? Isn't it a great motivator?
There is such great potential. There is incredible potential. We're experiencing deep loss because, as I mentioned before, the world around us as we knew it just kind of ends. So it's an opportunity to begin again fresh and to decide what's really important to us. And though the loved one is physically gone, the spiritual connection, the energy connection, however you want to say it. One woman I work with, she says, well, my husband's here. I talk to him all the time. And this isn't uncommon because you still feel that energetic connection. And that's to be honored, and now and always. And she was worried that if she has fun, she was feeling guilty. And we talked about how on an energetic level, her partner and her and the unseens in the greater world, the seed of life, that's what they want. At the end, we want our heart, love, expression to be open, to receive and to give.
Thank you.
I think that's really cool. And that made me think of something else, because sometimes somebody that's in our life, they play a role, and they are some sort of steadfast thing that allow us to not look at something else. And so in their passing and in the space that's left behind, we have to actually go back and look at some of that other ugly stuff that we chose not to look at. And so when, Scott, you were saying that a little bit earlier, I was like, oh, but I'm not sure if that's just the whole picture, because yes, we are profoundly affected by the people we choose to have in our life, and when we are affected by the loss of them, when they pass and move on. But boy, can some other stuff, totally unrelated, to this person's passing also come up because of our relationship with that person or the stories we've told ourselves and the safety. It's almost like a safety net, if you will. The life that we have given ourselves is called into question.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a great opportunity to look at all the old wounds and to take this opportunity to heal them and to feel them and to feel deeply. And once we learn to feel deeply and honor and accept all that we're feeling as part of the gift of the human experience, that's where the sweet, that's where we find the sweet within the bitter. And before we leave, I think we're almost wrapping up, but I did create a little bit of resources. So it's kind of a mishmash. People I've connected with in this field, and if listeners are interested in some resources to help them through the holidays, it can be a more difficult time if you've lost someone. I'll put the link to that in the bottom of the page, and I'm here if anyone would like to reach out.
Thank you. And one more time, your website is Bittersweet.
Oh, it's
well, go ahead.
it's bittersweetblessings.com.
Yes. And I had it Bittersweet Blessings with plural, but it's not. It's bittersweetblessing.com.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And thank you for compiling those resources, because if you know somebody who might be grieving, if you yourself are grieving, or if this is the time of year that memories of somebody that you might have lost many years ago brings up some things, I think, Misty, your resources are awesome, and your kind offer to be there, to be somebody to connect with, is also very amazing. And so thank you for that as well.
Okay, well, it's been my pleasure. I will warn people that when I gave the resources to my team, it was as an offering, and my team set it up as an opt-in. So you will need to opt in, but I won't be flooding you with stuff. If anything, once you opt in, that resource page, I plan to update it. So it'll be a page that it's a web page that you can go to, and there will be continually more things added to it. So we're growing, we're reaching out and taking the whole idea of death and dying and just opening and accepting. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, and we appreciate your time, and what a great conversation tonight.
Yeah. So we don't have our customary open and close, but perhaps we don't need one. This has just been a terrific bonding time and a terrific time to get the word out and to start talking a little bit more. The first element of taking away the fear of death is to talk about it, and I think that we've started at least accomplish that. Thank you kindly all, and this will be the last show for the Jess Plus Scott Plus You show this year, but we'll be back. Jess, is it the first Tuesday of January?
Oh,
do you recall?
Know what? It is the first Tuesday of January, yes. So the 7th, I believe.
So can you take us out, Jess, and then we'll see everyone in the new year.
Happy end of 2014. Honor the feelings that you have, the good ones, the not so good ones. Relish them, because this is actually a really good time of year with all the comfort food, all of the lights that surround us, and all of the positive things that we have to be some external support while we're going through whatever we're going through, so that we can become stronger, our roots grow deeper, and we can really support and be there not only for ourselves, but because we are whole in ourselves, we can support others. Thank you. See you guys next time.
Thank you. Thank you, Misty. Bye for now.